Welcome back to the Animation Industry Podcast. I'm Terry, and thank you for tuning in. Today's episode includes some really great advice that you won't typically hear about how to break into the industry if you're thinking of doing it alone, and how to stay on track to fulfill your dreams no matter what direction you feel pulled into. But first, I have a sponsored message to share with you, and it comes from my friends over at Bloop Animation, which is an animation learning platform packed with premium online video courses for aspiring animation filmmakers. They have courses for all major animation programs like Maya, Animate CC, Toon Boom, Blender, TVPaint, and many others, as well as some non-software courses too, like a storyboarding course, animation foundations course, and even one about making graphic novels, which covers absolutely everything you need to know from start to finish. And their courses are all in video form, so there's no deadlines or application process. You simply just pick a course and start learning in seconds. They even offer a free ebook titled Making an Animated Short, which covers their entire process step by step of how they made one of their films, from coming up with the idea to storyboarding, animation, and all the way to exporting the film. And you can get that book for free at bloopanimation.com/animationindustry. And you can check out their complete course library at bloopanimation.com/courses. Now back to today's episode. I would like to introduce you to Naseer Pasha, a Toronto-based 2D animator who is also the author of a graphic novel called Two Mistakes Too Many, and he's working on an independent short film right now called Legend, a Dragonball Tail. But besides all that, he's also worked on Netflix's Castlevania and was the animation lead on Battle Born and Extinction of the PS4 and PC. And between all that, he does an awful lot of freelance, so he has a ton of experience. So, Nas, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I might look a little bit distracted. I have two cats now, and they're being stupid and cute.
Wait, what do you mean now? Like you didn't have them before?
Well, I had a cat a year ago, and then recently I've been beckoned into accepting a second one into our life.
So. Oh my gosh, how is that? Is it great? Is it you adjusted?
I don't like to admit it, but I like it. I don't want to be those people where you meet them and they're like, "Oh, my cat, look at this picture." No. But yeah, I do like it, sort of.
Okay. You're quite an accomplished animator, and you've worked on a ton of like unique projects. But first, I want to talk about how you got into the industry, because you quit school after 2 years, but you're still one of like the top animators in the city here. So, what was the ultimate decision factor to discontinue school for you back then?
For me, it was I was only interested in learning how to work in 2D. I didn't want to do any 3D animation, and that's my program at Seneca was pushing into a third year of 3D animation or 3D game design. And I figured, you could always come back if you felt like you wanted to further pursue education. So I decided to leave, and I had some endeavors I want to undertake, like my graphic novel, and I was just eager to get to it. So I kind of got the blessings of the school, and I took off.
Nice. So when did you know that you only wanted to focus on 2D? And I'm asking because like a lot of people start going to school and they're like, I want to draw, like, I don't know, comics, or I want to draw special effects. Like they know right away what they want to do. But then when you're in school, you're exposed to everything. And there's kind of like the feeling that you should keep going and keep exposing yourself. So how did you find the confidence to know 2D was your thing and that was it?
Well, I mean, even just 2D being a thing, like, because there's so much, there's illustration, there's layout, there's animation, there's also just stuff within the category. So for me, like, from the beginning, I mean, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be an animator. And then I went to York University to pursue a degree on art related. And I was close to staying in that world, but I decided to just try the animation world because it was something I always wanted to do. So while I was there, that feeling of like, you've always wanted to do it, just keep going with it. It was just magnified like 100-fold. So it really influenced my mentality to be able to confidently choose something and stick with it. And I'm very much of the mindset, if something doesn't work out, it's not really a failure unless I let it affect me in ways it shouldn't. So if it didn't work out, I would just go do something else. And I don't like to just think about plan Bs, but like I know I can put myself into having to think of a new plan A. So I made it the plan A, and I kind of just stuck with it.
So it sounds like you kind of put all of your mentality and effort and everything into what you're doing at the time, rather than like, I'm going to do this maybe 85% and just hope that it works out, and then I have a plan B type of thing.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Okay.
But I do like planning for
Yeah.
like dark days.
Have you needed to do 3D animation in your career so far?
So,
No.
I've dealt with it. Like we've dealt with 3D assets and stuff like that. And the most I've ever dealt in 3D is I designed a plastic peg bar for myself. And then I even had my friend rebuild it because he's better at it. And then we got it printed, and that's what I used to animate on paper.
Wait, why wouldn't you just go with a regular peg bar then?
The regular peg is the holes are custom, the Acme hole punch. So you need an Acme hole puncher to be able to punch the paper. And even if you get like the Lightfoot one that has like the regular 3-hole punch that looks like a regular hole puncher, even those like regular hole punchers aren't made the same. They're off by millimeters and stuff. So I found like a really nice one at Staples, like a hole puncher, and I built the peg based off of that. But yeah, it made it worth it.
Makes sense. So how often do you do 2D like on paper animation then?
Yeah, all the time. Every production I'm on, I always try to at least do one scene in 2D on paper,
Oh,
even if
okay.
it's like, even if it's not for like myself, like if for my clients. But there have been occasions where like it's not the case. Like sometimes it's always only in Flash, and it doesn't help the production anyway. If anything, it'll actually slow it down if they had to just import my drawings and vectorize them and all sorts of stuff. But my freelance stuff, I almost primarily always work on paper, and then stuff that are really wide in terms of camera, I like to work digitally. But even those, I sometimes just do my roughs on paper and I scan them, and usually it ends up saving me a lot of time doing it on paper
Oh,
because
wow.
I make less mistakes on paper and I can draw faster. I have more pen control and everything's in one focus. And in digital, zooming in, zooming out, stroking, undo, and it's just a matter of fighting your actual penmanship digitally than your actual ability to animate. So
So what is your process then if you do it on paper? So you do it on paper first as like a pass, and then you scan it in, clean up the lines in Photoshop?
what I do is like I do all my thumbs on paper. I do all my initial animation on paper. Don't do too many in betweens, but I have a lot of breakdown drawings in my style of animation, so I don't end up having that many in betweens anyway at the end. So I'll scan it, I'll time it in like TVPaint or something, and if it's looking good, if it's ready to be in between, I'll just do the in betweens digitally if I have to, if they're not that tight, and then I'll print it and I'll clean it up on paper. So I get all my favorite parts on paper and all the parts I don't like on like digitally.
That's so interesting because there's like a big fear of people getting into the animation industry, at least from my classmates and stuff, that 2D on traditional paper is like dead. But you're saying that even though you do it kind of digitally, your process is to do it on paper, which is really cool.
Yeah, like I definitely like to be able to utilize my best skills in the fastest way I can execute
Yeah.
them. So I can draw on paper faster, but there are things that you gain from doing it digitally, like your instant playback or adjusting timing. But if you, I mean, it's about knowing like where you are in your skill set. So I'm at a point where like I can rough time on paper pretty good. And then even just like my proportions got better on paper, so I don't have to worry about like control T'ing stuff
Yeah.
and that sort of deal. But like yeah, like definitely merging the two processes I think is good. And to the fear of, oh, 2D is dead on paper, it really isn't. Maybe it is over here a bit because of like the Toon Boom and Flash prevalence in the industry. But I mean, if you look at like all the shows that we like in anime and stuff, like whether they're animating digitally, there's always a paper step. Like they'll sometimes just do all their cleanup on paper, and a lot of their animators do still animate digitally, but like that quality of the line, like it's not always tampered with.
So, from my understanding, a lot of studios will say like, okay, you need to know Toon Boom, for instance, to get a job here. Has that been a hindrance to you if you, I guess, are better on paper in like an interview or something rather than like on Toon Boom? Like, has anybody ever questioned that?
No, I'll use like just be honest when it comes to that. When they see your skill and they bring you in for that reason,
Yeah.
usually your interview is to see if they can work with you. And if they say, "Oh, well, do you know Tumu?" If you don't, just say, "I don't, but I can learn it in a week." It's not hard. Like if it's just drawing on another surface, another interface, like it's really not much different. It's just learning the program. You could probably even just do it in a day. A week's just being nice.
Right. So it really just comes, I mean, it makes sense. It comes down to your actual skill and talent as an animator first and foremost. Do you
Yeah,
know anybody else who does this? Is this like a thing that you've just kind of picked up yourself and it's like a niche thing that you do, or are other people doing this too?
I don't know a single person who does this
Yeah.
because the amount of time you can save in not planning on paper, uh, it's most people can't see another way. They can't see that you could probably save time in the long run by doing certain steps on paper. And I look at it in the long run. So maybe I lose time in force feed scanning, but the force feed scanner is faster than scanning on the glass.
Right.
And maybe I lose time in just fumbling with things and flipping paper, but the amount of time I save in drawing is exponential. So
Nice.
in the long run, it always ends up saving me time. And that was but my main instigation wasn't to save time. Is I'm really selfish with my drawings. Like I love having something at the end that I liked, and like
Right.
maybe I'll even just keep it and I'll look at it once at a time. But like if it's digital, like it's like where's that file? Oh, the file.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have it. It's on my Dropbox, or
It's like final version to edit, whatever.
Exactly.
That's so funny to me. Like, I tried to animate on paper and I hated it because the process of figuring out animation for me is so rough that I'm like constantly just feeling out shapes on like Toon Boom. But then when it comes to cleanup, I hate how long it takes on Toon Boom versus how fast I can just do it with my hands.
Yeah.
So it's the opposite. Huh.
So definitely, it feels like your in between would be like starting digitally, letting the tools augment your speed, and then like just taking a step away from it, and then finishing it all in another place. But yeah, it's pretty nice.
So, okay, so let's backtrack a little bit to when you were in school. Just tell me about the time where you decided to kind of exit school and try to get into the industry and start your other projects. Like, were you scared? Were you feeling like really excited? Like, what was going through your mind as to what your future was going to hold?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't scared. I was essentially only excited because I could not think about my projects. Like I was working on my first book while I was in school a little bit, and then one summer passed and I had finished it, and it was just for me. But I had to print quite a few copies just to be able to have a book for myself. So I did, and then I was selling it on like fan expos and stuff like that. But then when I finished school in that second year, the day it was done, I started working on my second book, and I told myself, what is the responsible amount of time to not be working? So for me, it was 6 months, and I finished the book in maybe 5.5 months, and I organized all the stuff on the back end, and it all came to plan. So then after that, I said, okay, you have to make a portfolio. And I was already so excited to make the portfolio, I started it a day before I was even finished my book. I remember just at night, all I could think about was how I was going to do it. And like if I try to look back at it, I can only remember the excitement. I don't remember ever being scared because and there was nowhere for me to go except just keep making the artwork. If people don't like it, they're not going to like it. There's nothing to be scared about. You just have to wait. If it's not good enough, it will become good enough once you're good enough. So yeah, after just kind of planning out, like I mentioned, like I do like planning quite a bit,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
but I do like planning for the long run though, not just the short term. Mostly for the long run, and those are all long-term plans. And for me, like I mentioned to you once that I felt like I cheated when I got in the industry. I felt like it felt really weird, like because my planning was planning for rejection. I was planning to. I didn't finish school, so like I was a year out of school earlier than my peers. So it's not like I'm doing this all together. We're not all looking for like workshops and information sessions and all this sort of like industry nights and all that sort of stuff together. So I'm here making a portfolio and I'm thinking, okay, well, what's going to happen is I'm going to start applying with this. I'm applying for months. It's probably going to be even a year. I'm going to be getting rejected from place to place. And then finally, I'm going to settle for like an internship or something. And that'll be like my entrance to this world. And I was willing to do it because at that age, with like it was financially responsible to do that. And to not just be looking, oh, just get the first thing that pays you, because it could be somewhere else. It might not even be in the industry that you're thinking of. But I felt like I cheated because the day I finished my portfolio, the next day I had an interview, and then the day after that, I think I got another interview, and then by the end of the week, I had a job. And I wasn't ready for that. I thought like this, not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to suffer for a little longer. And I'm used to always having to go through a lot of hard work to get what I want. So it was a very strange thing to me because that was essentially me saying, this is the type of life that I want. So if that's going to be the type of life you want, you imagine it's going to be the hardest thing to overcome to just get into the door. But I mean, I'm very thankful that it wasn't. But I mean, if you have a good portfolio, that's usually what will get you past a lot of those barriers.
So let's talk about what you put into your portfolio then. Why was it so attractive to people looking to hire you?
I thought about that a few times, and it's strange because we're not really like focused on like anime and comics and stuff like that in the Canadian animation scene, right? Like we get that terrible and mostly true stigma that we only do kids shows and service work and that sort of stuff. So at that time, especially in like 2013 when I was applying, it was definitely true. And my portfolio was nothing but anime. Like I created this world about the Monkey King, but I made it kind of related to Dragon Ball Z, and I did like my own sort of designs on it. But I think what made the portfolio attractive was to see how far I could take it. So I did a I did turnarounds. I did storyboard for an action sequence. I did layouts. I did color design. I did props, and I did one thing that nobody ever did in their portfolio for their design projects is at the time at least is I actually animated a fight sequence from my board and colored and composited it and did sound effects and voice on it with music. So I literally showed what could be taken from nothing to something,
Dang.
start to end. And I think that it's in its entirety was a bit more of a wow factor aside from the content, because maybe the employers weren't excited about the content, but I think they were excited that we found someone that is reliable. They can start something and they can definitely end it. So
Well, yeah, I like your approach because kind of the portfolios that I've seen so far is, say, for instance, somebody wants to become a background painter. So they paint a bunch of different backgrounds and they show that. But sounds like what you did is you envisioned essentially like a whole film or like TV series and tried to create every part of it almost like as a pitch. Like you had all the assets, the sound, everything. That's what
yeah,
it sounds like to me.
it definitely essentially is a pitch package, and most pitch packages don't even have completed samples of animation in them.
Right.
So, but I do respect like a person trying to develop a specialization that their portfolio is indicative of that. But for me, like my ultimate goal in life would be to be an animation director or showrunner, and I've gotten tastes of that here and there. But from the beginning, my portfolio unconsciously was actually showcasing that, and as you
Right.
were saying, like it was kind of showing how it would be like a pitch.
Yeah. Well, okay. So what are you doing now to become a showrunner or a director, animation director?
Um, for me, like I mean, I've animation directed on a few smaller freelance stuff, and I did a 3D show. Like I was doing like it was a kids show. They're like 3 minute episodes. So that was like my first like directing gig. But I'm more interested in 2D animation and that sort of directing. So more of my freelance work is every time I do one of those projects, it brings me closer to more of that work. And like I'm a strong believer in something one of my friends told me. He said, the more one type of work you do, the more that work will come to you. And it's not a coincidence, it's because every time you do it, you get stronger and you start learning things and you start cutting out bad habits. So with my personal work, like this Dragon Ball Z film that I'm making, other than it just being fun, I treated it kind of like a master's class for myself.
Yeah.
So all the types of animation I wanted to get into, you'll see a little bit of an example of that inside the film. And after it's all done, I think it'll be a good, solid example, at the very least, of like what I can do on the back end of a film. So, and since I did start it and end it, it does technically make me a showrunner for a super short film.
So, okay. So I still want to talk a little bit about how you entered the industry because it's a little interesting to me. So, school is like a defined path. There are profs there. They like give you all the technical skills. You get industry connections. They give you like a lot of feedback. There's
Yeah.
all those. It's like a whole package to get you into the industry. Since you kind of quit that, and you were doing things on your own for like a year while your I guess ex-classmates were still in school. How did you figure out all the like portfolio stuff, like where to find jobs, how to put together a resume, where to get connections? Like, were you also still taking courses to like up your 2D skills during that time too? Like, where did
Right.
you figure out how to do all those things on your own, essentially?
So in terms of courses, there's nothing like that. It's not that they weren't available. I just never thought to look for them.
Yeah.
In terms of like being able to gear portfolios and stuff like that, I always brought it back to if I was actually at the top of an industry, who would I be looking for to be working with me? So I wanted to create work in a respect that would be like, okay, well, that's a person that I would want on a team. So that's essentially it. And when it comes down to like mentorship or like looking for jobs and stuff like that, I mean, Canadian Animation Resources was a great start for finding job boards and stuff like that. But truthfully, like my mind at the time was just focusing on the artwork. Like if you could become so good, like people have no choice but to put you on their team because it becomes a bad business decision for them to not hire you if they know you can do so much for them with such a high level of art quality. So, and I didn't know that at the time. So for me, my only priorities was to be really good and efficient with my time. And if you can get both those things, the rest kind of you can figure out. I mean, being a young student leaving from school, all my peers are still in school. I did use that time mostly to focus on the art, and maybe when we were all finishing, we were all sort of like finding out who's that one guy you're supposed to be contacting if there's going to be a job fair or this and that. And usually your school is pretty good, whether it's Sheridan, though I didn't attend Sheridan, but I hear good things about them, or Seneca, which I did attend. They're pretty good at giving you indication of like where you should start looking, giving you the names of some studios. But for me, I'm a very cold call type of person, so I called Elliot and then I asked if I could talk to George Elliott, and then he told me like what they were doing, and then I applied. I called like Guru. I did all these sorts of stuff. I did maybe more than I should have. Like I remember my sister, she was really great with interviews and resumes and all that sort of stuff. Very professional. She's like, Naseer, what are you gonna wear on the day you go in? And I said, well, I'm gonna be wearing what you see me wearing right now. And she said, you're kidding me. Please put on a suit. I'm like, no. You don't understand how this industry is. People don't wear suits. She's like, no, professionalism isn't excusable just because of the job. She had a friend at the time who she kept badgering him to wear a tie to an interview, and he's going to be getting a job in a factory. And eventually he got the job, and then he said to his boss, he's like, I was always curious, why did you pick me out of those other guys? They had more experience. And the guy said, it's because you were wearing a tie. And then, so she always used that anecdote to me to be like, please just look right. So I got like this cheap suit from like some Chinese website, and I looked all right. And then I walked into my first interview, which was at a studio, and then I didn't accept that job. And then when I went to Elliot, and I did get the job, I remember when I finally came in, the receptionist, she's like, "Oh, you're here to see George and stuff." I'm like, "Yeah." So then I get inside, they're like, "Hey, I remember you. You're the guy who wore that suit." I'm like, "Oh no, I don't want to be that guy." And then like the receptionist comes back in, she's like, "Oh, you're Naz, right? Oh, the suit guy, right?" I'm like, "Oh." So yeah, don't. If I can give anyone advice, just don't. Like animation really is that one area where look good enough, but like you don't have to suit up. But
I've heard that.
to be honest, it left a really good impression on them. So
Yeah. Oh, I've heard that. I've heard that a lot too from people in the industry. Like, please don't wear a suit. But funny story, I actually got my first marketing job because I was, well, also requirements and whatever, but because I was wearing a suit, it made me stand out because everybody else that interview just wore like a nice shirt. But they were like, I was working with, if you remember Target when they came to Canada,
yeah.
part of my job was to like partner with them. And so they wanted somebody that looked professional. And I was like, it was me. No, that's great. It almost sounds like you're treating yourself as a business though. Like you're thinking about what assets you have to offer that can become invaluable to students or studios and clients and stuff, which I think is great. And do you think that's where a lot of your successes come from? Just your mentality of how you're treating your career?
I think so.
Yeah.
Uh, I think like to not to Canadian animation's credit, but I do think there's a lot of abuse of artists and like their labor. I think like there's people will take advantage of how much they can get you for, how much hours you're supposed to be putting in, and they'll try to put things in front of you like, oh, this is a great production, or oh, like there's a lot of energy in the team. Can we trade? Or would you want to be part of that and stuff? And like they really amp you up. And when you're leaving school and you're really into this sort of cartoon mentality, you're like, oh, this is gonna be my life. This is gonna be great. You start to soon get jaded because you allowed yourself to be a part of that. And it's not just like, oh, I'm not gonna take part of that. It's not easy because this is how there's a trend of people like essentially giving their labor for less than it's worth. So if you don't treat yourself like that, I mean, you're not going to be giving if you're a dealer of like iPhones, you're not going to be giving people deals just because they're asking for it, right? well, we need 10, but could you sell it to us for 80% off or something like that? So if you treat yourself like as a business, not just in respect of like having a business number, but like actually like this is your product that you're able to sell to people, which is your labor and your skill, um, not giving the discount and really being on top of like what you have to offer, not compromising on that. I think that's really important.
So
And
how do you say I get a job offer tomorrow. How do I identify if I'm being taken advantage of from like a freelance or like a studio perspective?
yeah,
Like I'll be excited because it'll be my first paid animation gig. So I'll be like, yeah, I'll take anything, right? Like
yeah.
how
I
do
mean,
I know?
yeah. There's a few things that you can consider. So one is uh, what you're trying to gain out of it and what you're actually going to gain out of it. So if you're trying to gain job experience, if you're trying to make connections, if you're trying to do whatever it is you want to do, if you can weigh it and you feel like you're not getting it, it may not be worth your time. It may not be the case of being ripped off or anything like that, but it may not be worth your time. You just have to know what you want out of the job. So certain jobs say they're low pay, but they're high quality. And you're like, oh, this beckons my interest a lot. So I may not be getting the money that I want, but I'm getting some sort of nourishment and like the type of work that I may be producing, that's very cathartic. But then
Yeah.
inversely, you may find a job where the quality of the work is not even close to what you're looking to work on. Some crappy kids show, and you're like, oh, this is beneath me, or whatever the reason might be. But the pay is good, and if what you're looking for is a payday at that time, then it's checking off in your list what you're trying to get out of the job. So having a real expectation of what you're trying to do at that time in your life is really important to know if you're getting ripped off. But other than that, if you want like a really basic answer, I guess I should have started with it, is just trying to research some industry rates on like what the average rate is for a storyboard or a character design package, what a weekly rate is as a painter or something like that. And they're
Where do you,
usually around the same.
yeah, where do you find that information? Is there like a
Uh,
resource or something?
you could find it online by just Googling it, but just by knowing a few people, I mean, I have some knowledge on that just from being in the industry, but like
Uh,
mostly like if you just get into like a bit of a circle, like your teachers could probably even tell you that in animation school. Yeah, the information's out there.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Ask around. So, I guess the advice is step away from the starry eyes that you have and really evaluate what you are getting into based on what you want out of it. Like if
Mostly,
it's,
like
yeah,
if you're only looking for one thing, you'll only be satisfied if you get that. So if you're only looking for money, if it's not a high paying job, it doesn't matter what the project looks like. It's not gonna satisfy you. But if you're only looking for good projects and you look at like something like anime where you only make $25 a scene, where regardless of how many people are in it or how long it is, um, then you're gonna be getting what you want, but it may not be so sustainable. Both are not sustainable. Like if you're very artistic and you really want to be working on good projects, but all you get are high paid, really unchallenging projects, it's not sustainable because you're gonna go crazy.
yeah,
And the inverse is unsustainable for obvious reasons, for money and health and that sort of stuff.
totally. Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I switched careers, so
Right,
definitely,
yeah.
I definitely feel that. So something we talked about before this chat was the concept of like childhood monsters, and it relates back to what you were saying about building up your skills and like making yourself invaluable to companies because you're so skillful.
Mhm.
So I guess the concept is like nowadays there's so much free education through YouTube or whatever out there that, and I'm experiencing this too. Like I'm 31 and some of my classmates are like 18, 19 and their skill level in like technical skill level is like way above mine already.
Mhm.
So like how do you compete with kids who are coming like super young, extremely talented? Like how do you compete with that if you're looking to like, I don't know, for what would you say to me before I got into this industry? You know, like I
Mhm.
had no skills. I put together a portfolio basically is how I gained my skills.
So maybe I can give you two answers. The first would be kind of like, um, if they're looking for work locally, so much of it is dependent on if people just like working with you. Usually how I see it is if you apply with a portfolio online or whatever, and they're like, this person looks good, they'll want to interview you. If they want to interview you, in my mind, you already have the job. They're just seeing if you're a nice person to work with and you can get along with people. So in that case, you can see where your personal relationship with your employer, potential employer, is really important. But when it's like, say, somewhere where you can't reach and it's just a bunch of people online applying and you have 18-year-old beasts, and then there's you and you feel like you're not at the level of these guys, this is where my second answer is just get good. Like
Yeah.
just be so good that people can't ignore your skill.
That makes sense. Like you're basically saying you have to know what your worth is in the situation. So if it's a job you want to take locally, your value in being a good person, a good people person is actually higher than your value in being an amazing animator, for instance, if
Yeah.
you are working on a freelance project overseas. Like they just want the art, not you, right?
Yeah. I mean, and not 100%, but yes, it's much more important
Gotcha.
locally. Yeah.
So, okay, so given that and what we talked about previously, if somebody is thinking of getting into the industry, either it be locally or I guess non-locally, how do they make the decision on like whether they go to school, whether they learn on their own, whether they take on a mentorship or something? Like
Yeah.
how do you, because like for instance, going to school or shared in college is it's like a catch-all for everybody wanting to get in. Like if you want to up your skill level, become a people person, work in groups, like all that stuff, right? But like
Yeah.
say if you're questioning what your path should be, but you know you want to get into it, what is your advice there?
Now, just to clarify your question, is it before starting any formal or informal education or while you're in it?
I guess both. Why not just for somebody who's in a spot right now thinking like, I know I'm going to get into this career path.
Hmm.
What is the best way for me to approach this? Because it could be continue school, discontinue school, do online course, don't do online
Yeah.
course, like all this stuff, right?
I think a really good way would be when you're ready to do it, give yourself a period of time, and in that period of time, make the decision that you're going to do it, but just don't start it. So to be more specific, if I wanted to go to animation school, uh, for me it would have been 1 year. If I said in 2020 I want to go, the actual plan is to go in 2021. And in 2020, I spent the entire year researching and actually trying out everything I think I'm going to learn in animation on my own. And whether it's through online courses or just through friends, or there's like a lot of Discord groups now where like people to just a lot of artists collectively share work and stuff like that. There's enough resources online for you to really pursue an informal self-created curriculum. And I'm really big on creating my own curriculum and then doing it and then moving on to the next thing. So, and I would say that would be a good way to start it. Give yourself a period of time, whether it's like a few months or it's like a year or half a year, and then do it. Like you've already made the decision. Now it's just you doing it. And then when that half year or whatever the time period is over, if you now feel like, okay, I got something out of it, I need to take it to the next level, and someone else is going to help me do that, whether it's a school or an online academy, it'll be more apparent to you. It won't be just a guess. Oh, let's see how this works out. You'll know.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I like that of like because if you don't give yourself a time limit, you could get caught up in a cycle of just going on forever or not even
Yeah.
starting, I guess. So, okay,
Yeah.
so what do you say to, for instance, like Sheridan has a small acceptance rate. I think it's like 10%,
Yeah.
which means a lot of people don't get in on their first try, and many people spend a couple of years trying to get in, right? So say for instance you set yourself that 6 month time period, you put together your portfolio, you learn everything, you don't get into school, for instance, should you keep going on? Like do you think you could learn on your own? Like I don't know, what do you say to that?
I think like what it is if you use that 6 months and apply and you get rejected, I use that as indication that your skill level isn't high enough. If your interests are all in the right place, they're where they need to be. So just work on the skill level. So whether it's taking more painting courses or personal life drawing, you all if as long as you're not waiting for the next application date, as long as you're actively doing something,
Yeah.
it'll only make your next application better. And maybe in that time, maybe you have a realization where like maybe I don't want to be going to school, or maybe it reinforces it. I really need to get into this school. So yeah,
Yeah, so maybe at that point, do some evaluation, self-reflection, figure out where you want to go next and why you didn't get there. And then, yeah, that totally makes sense.
yeah,
And some of the classmates that I have that spent a few years getting in are some of the best artists that I know. So makes
yeah.
sense. Um, like, was there I guess I have a first question about this. What are you currently doing to increase your skill right now, other than
Yeah.
work?
I mean, other than working, like there are other things that indirectly affect my skill, like so my ability to understand notes or being able to take direction. Maybe that comes from my interest in doing research. So like when I was like in school and I was like studying critical theory or like globalization or whatever it was, my ability to gather material, digest it, compartmentalize information, and find out where it'd be useful, is 100% augmenting what I do right now. So bringing that, say, to a production standpoint, being able to actually deal with things on the back end, like dealing with assets, dealing with actual file types, renaming things, using days just for reference and study, using days to categorize information, making spreadsheets and all this sort of stuff. Like it definitely is really important, and it's the part that nobody likes to really focus on, and they end up doing it by consequence, not by planning.
Right.
So definitely to increase my skill, other than just like maybe working on this film, which is kind of like I mentioned, like a master class for myself. I'm constantly studying like animated stuff that I like. I used to watch Ranma a lot in the morning, and when me and my wife were watching it, like I keep pausing it. I'm like, oh wait, just one more time, and I would watch how they use like 5 frames to do like a head pop or something like that, and I was constantly doing it, and then like, but I wasn't drawing or taking notes. I just kept rewinding and watching, and I didn't realize how much it was actually affecting me because for me that was just fun. But one day my friend Jeremy says, hey, you know your a lot of your new Dragon Ball stuff is looking like very like Ranma-ish. And he showed me like this one gif of a scene that he liked. He's like, "This is reminding me of your work recently." I'm like, "I can't believe you said that. This is so sick." So yeah, definitely studying things you like. I'm big into like the studying and the research and the gathering. But I though this isn't what you asked, I want to maybe focus for a second on. I really like to divide things and not do too many things at once. So like if there's a day like when I was getting into animation and I finally left school and I did stuff in that you mentioned I was working on Battle Born. That was like one of my first bigger responsibilities at the time. So and I was doing notes for people and I was doing my own work. But one day like I was just working and uh, I just had to do more in betweens. More I was getting like exhausted. It was the day just started, and I'm like, why do I feel like this? Why don't I feel like I want to do this? Like, am I wrong? Like, is animation maybe not what I want to do? Aren't animators always supposed to just want to be animating? And I realized what it was for me was that I didn't I liked drawing, but I didn't like starting an animation. So sitting and looking at the paper, not knowing where I'm going to start, how big the character is going to be on the paper, how long the scene is going to be, like all that back end stuff that's not related to the actual drawing of the scene, I didn't like it. So doing it all in the same day, sitting there and thinking and then drawing, not getting the page that I want and tossing it out, I took all that away and did one thing at a time. So I would spend what I call my download day. So I'd look at all the reference. I would practice drawing the characters and a few poses, draw their faces over and over and over again, wrong and right, wrong and right. Then I would get a little sheet of paper. I do thumbnails and act out the scene that I wanted. When I liked the thumbnails and they're just stickmen, I would get a single sheet of paper with a layout box on it, and I draw the character once because I knew how to draw her now, and that was it. Once I got the drawing that I liked, I put my pencil down and I wouldn't work on it. And the next time I came back to my table, all of that was downloaded. So all I had to do was execute now. And once I figured that out, and it was during Battleborn that I figured that out, um, I instantly felt like a real animator, like real, quote unquote real, but like no, for real, it was the step that took me there. So if you can separate your planning from your actual drawing, it will make things just more fun. And it definitely, I mean, whether you look at like assembly line stuff in a factory or if it's like something in animation, compartmentalizing tasks, it always speeds up the process. It makes everything more efficient. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like you've like nailed down to a T your optimal process to export your best work.
Mostly. It
I,
still needs some work, but yeah, mostly there.
but no, that sounds really efficient. Like, I guess I would say most people approach their career, whatever in general, is just whatever's coming at them, they'll just take care of in like a queue, I guess, versus like, okay, I need to animate, so I'm gonna have a download day to give my
Mhm.
brain time to process it. So when I come back to it, it's not like frustrating to figure out. I just feel more natural doing it.
Yeah, and once you get into a habit of it, because habits they're really powerful when it comes to animation, you really start realizing what you can get done in 4 hours, what you can
Yeah.
get done in six, and like I mentioned to you, like six is a really important number for me.
I have
So
this thing in my mind where I always tell myself like never underestimate 20 minutes of time because
yeah,
like when I'm in the groove, I can do so much in 20 minutes. but like sometimes I'm just like sitting on the couch and I don't want to start anything, and like I'm on my phone on Instagram or whatever, and an hour passes, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
could have done so much.
Yeah, and like that's part of it, right? So like that hour of you idling and your mind drifting, that should be put into your calculations of how long it takes to do the 20 minutes worth of
Oh, for
work.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I've realized that the hardest part of anything for me is just starting something, because as soon as 5 minutes passes, I can get in the groove and it's all fine.
Yeah.
It's just like the mental block of like walking in the door or like getting groceries and putting them down to actually switching mindset and starting.
Yeah.
So that's for me. So we've talked a lot about kind of how you developed your skill set, your career, what you want to do. You want to be an animation director. If an opportunity were to come into your like email inbox right now, and it was like you would drop everything and take that, what would it be for you?
Mm,
Because you're already working on your short film, which already sounds like
yeah.
kind of your dream. You're doing a lot of freelance right now, and you're working full time. So
It's hard to say because for me, like, I haven't like I've been trying more like recently, like over the last year, to get my interest outside of just drawing because I've mainly always only been about drawing, and there were other things that I like. I just wasn't giving them enough time. So like, just because I'm becoming the best artist I can be, does that make me the best friend I can be, or the best son or husband, or like all sorts of stuff. So, I started to like value those, and honestly, I cannot think of a single thing, whether it's as cool as Spider-Verse or as awesome as Kill la Kill. Like, um, I'm making something for myself that I've always wanted to, and that's
yeah.
really important to me. Like, I've had to actually recently turn down a few positions. They're attractive positions, but it's because no matter how much that project is worth to me, it's not cooler to me than what I'm doing for myself. And if I can already have a day job that's giving me the money that I need, and I don't want. There's always gonna be time to make money in my life, you know, like. But you can't offer me a project that's more interesting to me than the one I'm working on right now.
So wait, let's talk about this, because I am kind of facing this a little bit. Like I'm back in school, but I did a project over the summer that is getting a lot of attention, and like people are asking for it to be continued, and I really want to, but it's like not part of my plan right now. So
Yeah.
I feel like my plan is like go to school, like develop the connections, develop my skill, like keep
Hmm.
these projects on the side. But like it would also be amazing to just kind of drop everything, work on these other opportunities, and like see where that goes. So I'm also very like I have every like my calendar, everything is like planned. I have like next 6 months in my mind planned out, and like I always stick to that because I wanted to talk to you about spontaneity a little bit, like
Yeah.
which is why I asked that question. And you said you gave up some really good opportunities because they didn't fit in the mindset of what you're working in currently that you're enjoying.
Hmm.
So what would it take, or have you done spontaneous things that have like outside of the thing that you've planned that have led to really good things for you before?
All the time, almost too much.
Almost
So
too much.
that
Okay.
sounds weird saying after what I'm saying, but there's a
Yeah.
way that you can plan your spontaneity, which sounds like an oxymoron, actually, and it is really. So what I do is because I plan a lot too. Like instead of using agenda, I just have a piece of paper and I would write down all the things that I need to get done, say in the course of 2 months. I write them on the side, and then on the week by week basis, as I'm writing, I'm like, how long do each one of those things take? If one thing takes 4 days, another thing takes 10 days. I start giving them a value system of how much time they take, and then I start putting them in my schedule. But what I always do when I do that is I always overestimate the time it will take to do it. So, and I know like maybe say if this is the right term for it, like the industry rate for finishing that would be 4 days, but I know I can get it done in two. So if I can get it done in two, I'll allocate 4 days for it because that's when it's expected. And that's what's expected of you if you weren't working at home, right? If you're working somewhere else for somebody, but you're still, everything's the same. It's just that you're on your own. So since I allocated the proper time that's supposed to take, that bonus 2 days is mine. I can do whatever I want with it. So all these times I keep interrupting myself with new projects. I just did something for the Toronto Raptors. It was a 3.5 week project, and I had declined the project the first time but because I thought the time frame didn't work. But I'm like, you know what? Could I make this work? And because I had allocated in a month, I have to do something like 570 cleanup frames for Dragon Ball Z. But because I was saving time on my storyboard, that free time was being turned into Dragon Ball time. And because I put Dragon Ball time there, I didn't need a month to do it. I only needed 3 weeks. And I had saved so much time that the offset of all this allowed for me to just spontaneously just grab something. So it's planned in a way, but it's
So wait, but you're saying you only allow for spontaneity in the time period that you have that's free after you're done your responsibilities.
no, that's just a responsible way of doing it. I'm also irresponsible where like I'm like that looks good. Okay, you know what? If I can survive and not doing just these few other things that I'm really interested in, as long as it doesn't affect what I have to do for someone else's benefit too, like because I have a duty to like make a proper wage. So if it doesn't affect that, if it only affects the things I'm interested in and not that I absolutely need, then yeah, I'll say fuck it, man. I'll do whatever I want. But more recently, because of this project of mine, it's been so important to me. Like I've been able to say no to a lot more things, even if they're really like attractive, but not completely.
So it sounds like you're you feel very fulfilled in many aspects of your life. Is there anything that you are still striving towards other than the animation director that is like missing from what you're doing right now?
I want to become a Mongolian throat singer.
Yeah?
No, I'm not joking. Yeah, no, I wish I could
Can
go to
you do a
Mongolia.
little bit right now? Are you able to?
Uh,
No?
They'll blow out your speakers. I'm
I
joking.
would have put that in like the podcast intro. Like you'll hear some Mongolian throat singing. That's awesome.
I
Where
bring
did
it.
that come from? Is this like
I,
a
well, I've always like been interested in like singing from like tuba and stuff like that. And like I was watching a movie called Dororo once with my wife, and it was like it's about like the samurai named Hyakimaru. And at the beginning, there was just this really weird song, and I liked it a lot. I'm like, wait, what is that called? Like, I really like that type of music because I've heard like bits and pieces of this growing up, and it wasn't even from like Mongolia, but like I found out it was this tuba band called Hunhur 2, and when I looked them up and all their stuff was like that, and then all of Mongolian and tuba music all sound the same. It sounded like they're sung by one person, but like I loved it. I loved it so much, and it wasn't just an obsession. Like I felt like no, this has to become a part of my life. So at one point in my life, I'm gonna be going out to those plains and like going into the Gobi Desert or something.
Oh my goodness, amazing. That's so fun. So I think I have like one last question. You sound like you are crazy busy all the time and you have a lot of responsibilities. This is something that kind of like resonates for me because like I also am in a similar situation. Uh, so how do you make sure you are always working towards your dream when you have like cats and rent to pay and a wife and freelance and etc. Like, how do you make sure you're always, even though these other paths are like diverting you from this central path, how do you always keep on that central path?
Yeah, for me, like the central path is those things actually they're not forks in the road for me because my central path is like I want to be happy. I can be happy in a lot of ways. I can be happy through the things I learn or the people I'm with. Like I said, like if you become the best artist, you're maybe not the best son. It doesn't make you that, right? One doesn't just lead to the other. So one thing, like I talked to you about this like once before. Like I have like this rule of six that I try to follow, where if I would equate like 6 hours to sleep and 6 hours to do professional work. Like I have to be good enough that I can do an 8 hours worth of work in 6 hours, and I've gone to that speed, so I'm able to incorporate that properly. And then another 6 hours to spend on personal projects, and another 6 hours to be a good husband. And I take hours here and there from some of those groups, and I reallocate them here and there, but it usually works out mostly. But I think if if you can always think about like what the grand picture is, my grand picture is just to be happy. None of these will be like forks in the road to me
Yeah.
because all of them will make me happy. Knowing that my wife is happy with me, that'll make me happy. Knowing that my dad, I have a good relationship with him, that makes me happy. Knowing that I'm doing a project on my own for me only, for nothing other than making it, that'll make me happy. So there's a difference between soul food and your regular meal. The regular meal is the one that pays the bill, but the soul food is what if people paid you nothing, you would do it anyway.
Right.
So, and if you don't have that in your life, I think even if people think they don't have it, they have it in some form, but they just don't realize what it is yet. Because it's the only thing that will drive you to make money in this industry. Because you can make probably the same, if not more, money somewhere else. So why would you put yourself through something that requires so much skill and attention? So yeah, like to stay on the path to answer your question properly is I just try to evaluate what things are worth to me. And usually at the time, if they're worth something to me, like they tend to always be that valuable to me going in the long run. So keep, not losing track of that and not exhausting yourself on any one task. So like, for example, I did say I try to spend 6 hours on my personal project, but I don't spend 6 hours. I just let the hours add up. I actually spent about 3 hours on it. I spent 3 hours essentially a day for a year for my Dragon Ball thing, and now I finished animating it. So now I'm going to spend about 3 hours a day for the next year to finish it. So with the compositing and all that stuff. So I spend an hour and a half in the morning. I start my day with that, and I try to end it an hour and a half later. So not exhausting yourself and jading yourself with the things that are actually interesting to you is really important. Like it's easy to lose sight of what's too much good in your life when you actually have it. You know?
Yeah, I like how your answer was to be happy because something that I learned is if you think you're going to be happy by reaching a specific goal, like I'll only be happy if I'm an animator, for instance, then like unless you enjoy the process, you're probably not going to be happy and you're
Yeah.
not going to enjoy becoming that thing. And then when you are that thing, then like, so what is your life? So
Right.
like something for me that I learned was happiness comes through the process of things. So like working towards an animation career, all the little facets of that I find happiness in, rather than like I'm in an animation role right now or something like that. So
Absolutely. And I always find myself saying, what's next? You know, like if I, once I finish the film, I like, well, what's next? What am I going to do next? Like I usually have indication of what I want to do next, but like when you find yourself not asking that anymore, like maybe it's time to like switch gears.
yeah.
So, but yeah, there's not really
Uh,
much more to say than that.
No, I agree. That's what happened to me in my business career when I reached a point where I kept asking what's next, and what's next didn't really make me feel fulfilled in my mind when I imagined myself progressing in this area. Uh,
hmm
that really enabled me to reflect and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So
Yeah, I think like also like success is a word people always bring up in animation. It's like, oh, you're successful, but like success to one person is not the same to another, right? That's so
oh,
obvious to say, but like if you really try to figure out what your version of success is, whether it's like being able to spend enough time with your friends and family and then doing your own work, or just making a lot of money, like you'll find it once you're able to actually name it.
yeah, and I think it's really tough in a creative career too, because you're always comparing yourself just at the lowest level of like skill that you have or like where you are and stuff like that. Like I find that a lot of people struggle with comparing
hmm
their art even when their version of success is, I don't know, doing beautiful backgrounds versus animation even.
Yeah,
So yeah,
absolutely.
cool. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share or talk about today?
Um, I'm more interested in what you have to say. So like, I'll answer anything you have in
Well,
mind.
I kind of asked all the questions I wanted to ask. Do you want to talk about some of the processes of like Castlevania specifics or like some of the projects that people might know of, some of the like quirky things that happen in those?
There's not too much to say. And also like I don't know what I'm allowed to say because like I don't want to like put
Okay.
like either like an incorrect impression of any studios or people involved. But like
Yeah.
I mean to give you an overall sort of feel like what Castlevania was like, I was just doing some storyboards on season two. I didn't have enough availability to do more work, but their quality of drawing was so good in the boards. Like I couldn't believe it. And then I was like, okay, I gotta match this. So I did my stuff, and the first note I got back was your drawing quality is too high and it's causing problems
Oh
because
no.
you're drawing very good, but you're drawing them off model. And because the drawings are so tight, when this gets to Korea, they're just going to look at your drawing and trace it, and they're going to trace it off model. So you have to loosen up. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to do this? I kept just studying like what they were doing, and I realized sort of shortcuts they were taking. And then I was doing some of my stuff, and again, it was still looking a little tight. But then there was one drawing I did of this girl called Carmila, and then they circled it like this one. This is it. I'm like, okay, that's my range. And then like I again like I kept taking like those little freelance things. The what made them attractive to me is like I know I'm gonna gain something out of this. So being able to work with those particular directors and in that style, I knew that was gonna be much more valuable to me than the money I was gonna be getting out of it, and the pay was fair too. So I learned from them like how to really get good drawings while still loosening up and keeping the quality high. And it's influenced how I work on a lot of other stuff now too. And I also animated a bit on Castlevania for season two, like a year later. But again, it wasn't too much. But I remember doing that, and I had to animate. His name's Simon Belmont, I think. Uh, I had to animate his chain. He has like this whip that's made out of chain, and I'm like, how am I gonna animate this? Like this, like so I started like referencing chains and stuff like that. And then I started looking at how like all the other guys were doing on it, like Patrick Sanders and like my friend Gus, and I'm like, these guys are getting in their first pass. Like this is crazy. So like I really had to like try to figure out how to do this. And like my first pass, like I remember when I handed it in, like the boards for the action sequences are specifically loose because it's just about getting the poses down. Forget about face steal and all that sort of stuff. So it's proportion and pose. And I remember I just slightly deviated from the boards just a little bit because that's the first thing like people expect of you in animation. It's like, oh, they give you a board. They say, why does it look just like the board? Please, like, just put some flavor into it, make it better, right? So I look at this board. It's a great board, and then I added like little bits of things in here. And he said, why did you not do what's just in the board? It was perfect. Just follow the board. And he said it in a nice way because like the choreograph, they knew exactly what they wanted. So like I had added like a type of like an antic to like a chain grab or something like this, and like the way he wrapped it around his arm and pulled it around, and then I had done it internally 6 more times before I handed it in even once more because it wasn't good enough to me. I'm like, I know they're not gonna like it like this. So then I handed it in and I didn't hear anything back from them. I'm like, I hope no news is good news. And then a week passed by and didn't say anything. And then a second week, I'm like, hey man, is everything okay? And he's like, oh yeah, no, that was good. We sent it to cleanup. Sorry, we didn't get back in touch with you. Everything's just so busy. I'm like, okay, all right, I get that, I get that. So it was fun, and uh, the overarching director for the show, his name is Sam Dietz. He's an amazing artist. Like, he's really in tune with like the American and the anime stuff, and his anime style on Castlevania was really good. And my supervising director was uh, that hotshot, really handsome guy. What was his name? um, he's on Invader Zim. How am I not remembering his name now? I'm always talking Spencer Wan. He's insanely gifted, and like he would give me some notes here and there on like how to get the faces to be a little bit better, how he drew his eyes and stuff like that. So as little as it may have been, like I gained a lot of it, and they probably don't even realize it. Yeah.
Nice. Wow, that's you also talk really fast. How do you pick up all these freelance gigs?
I was just really one thing from the other. So like going back to that thing where when you do one thing, more of that comes to you. Like when I started on Army of Frogs, like we were doing like a trailer for it a long time ago. I did one scene and I stayed in touch with those guys, and then they got a contract for this Battle Born thing, and then we worked on something bigger. And then from there, like some other people were contacting us here and there. So it's a bit of a testament to like good work will always find the people who need more of that work to be made. So
So you just check your DMs every once in a while, and there's a bunch of new gigs in there?
I mean, yeah, every once in a while there is, and uh, I mean that is kind of how it goes, yeah. But Sanford Green, he's one of my friends and artists that I work with a lot. He has a studio called Secret Sauce, and they're the ones who did Battleborn and stuff. Like he's been a great link to like some of these projects and that sort of stuff.
Once again, it proves that it's all about who you know.
Yeah, a lot of it is, yeah.
A lot of
But
it.
honestly, if your work is so good, no one can ignore it. They don't have a choice. Like it's such bad business for them to see something good and not pounce on it if they can, because it'll make them money too. So
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I think that wraps it up for me, unless there's something you thought of you want to share now.
not anything worth talking about.
Do you have any? So a lot of students, animation students, or people wanting to start a career in animation, listen to this. Do you have any final thoughts for those people?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those guys are like younger than us, so
Yeah.
like just don't rush. Like the industry's not gonna go anywhere. Just focus on like learning what you can as much as you can, and worry about the money later. But if you're really gonna do that, just think about like how long it's responsible to just be doing what you want to do. I used to be the kind of person who liked to sequester myself and just work on one project at a time, just really just get into it, working through the midnight hours and that sort of stuff. And it was really how I worked most of my life. But then after like life changed up and stuff like that, I changed that as a consequence of my lifestyle. But then I started realizing how appealing that was, getting my day life back, getting able to wake up in the morning and not like you stay up at night. You feel like, oh, if I don't stay up at night, I'm missing out. But then if you waste your morning, you feel like I just wasted a day. So like it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle. So, and the base advice would be like, um, don't only just think about general stuff. Like if you're really interested in something, really focus on getting good at it, but don't ignore the rest. So
Yeah.
don't. I would say trying to market yourself as a generalist is not a good idea, because in like behind doors, generalists are people don't remember them. They're not respected as much. They're not called even just because they can do more. They're not actually called back as much. So if you have a specialization, really get good at it, but just don't ignore the rest. If you're able to be a bit of a generalist, that's good. But and just don't rush. That's it. Just don't rush any of this. You can't rush how long it takes to draw something, right? You can get faster at it, but you can't rush how long it takes you to get good at it.
Yeah. And get your quality sleep every night.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know how you get away with 6 hours. I need at least 8, but that's insane.
I feel heavy when I wake up if it's
Oh
longer than six.
no,
Yeah.
I need like
Wow.
10 coffees if I only get 6 hours. Jeez. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it, Naz.
Thanks,
It's been a
man.
pleasure chatting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're listening and you'd like to get in touch with Naz or follow his work, the best way to do so is by going to his Twitter, which is Remenjance, and I will include a link to that in the description of this podcast. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for listening. Okay,
Yeah,
bye.
man. Take care.